The invitation had arrived on a Tuesday. Nathan Cross found it wedged between a credit card statement and a coupon flyer for a pizza place 2 blocks from his apartment. The kind of mail that made a person feel like the universe had absolutely no idea who it was dealing with. Prestige Connections. An exclusive evening of meaningful introductions. Black tie preferred. By invitation only. He'd almost thrown it away. He would have thrown it away if Marcus hadn't been standing in his kitchen at that exact moment, eating the last of Nathan's leftover pasta without asking and reading the card over his shoulder. "Dude," Marcus set down the fork. "Do you know what this is?" "Junk mail with better paper." "This is Prestige Connections, Nathan. They charge $15,000 just to get on the waiting list." Marcus turned the card over, then back again, like he was examining a rare artifact. "How did you even get this?" Nathan took the card back and set it on the counter. "One of my clients sent it. Guy I've been doing accounting work for, Hargrove, the real estate guy. He said it was a gift, said I needed to get out more." He made air quotes with his fingers, his words. "Hargrove sent you to a $15,000 matchmaking event." "Apparently." Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Then he pointed at Nathan with the fork. "You're going." "I'm really not." "Nathan, when was the last time you went on a date?" "I've been busy." "When was the last time you talked to a woman who wasn't Lily's preschool teacher or your mother?" Nathan opened his mouth, closed it. "That's what I thought." Marcus grabbed the invitation again. "You're going. I'll babysit Lily. End of discussion." The suit Nathan wore that evening had last seen the inside of a dry cleaning bag 4 years ago for his cousin's wedding. It still fit. Barely. He'd had to leave the top button of the shirt undone and hope the tie covered it. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror at 7:15, he looked at himself for a long moment and thought, "This is a mistake." Lily appeared in the doorway behind him, clutching her stuffed rabbit. The floppy-eared one she'd named Gerald for reasons that remained mysterious to everyone, including herself. "Daddy, you look fancy," she said. "I look desperate," he said. She considered this with the gravity only 4-year-olds can manage. "What's desperate?" "It means wearing a tie that's too tight because your friend made you do something you didn't want to do." She nodded seriously, like this was useful information to file away for later. Then she patted over and tugged at the bottom of his jacket to straighten it. 4 years old and already trying to fix him. He felt something squeeze in his chest, the particular ache of loving a person so much it occasionally felt like a structural problem. He crouched down to her level. "You be good for Uncle Marcus, okay?" "Uncle Marcus lets me have ice cream before bed." "Uncle Marcus is not supposed to let you have ice cream before bed." "He says it's a secret." Nathan looked over her head to where Marcus was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, expression entirely unrepentant. "It's one night," Marcus said. "Go meet some people, talk, be a human being for a few hours. The world won't end." Nathan kissed the top of Lily's head, stood up, and grabbed his keys off the counter. "If she has a nightmare, I know. And don't let her watch anything with, I know, Nathan." "The emergency numbers are on the fridge." "I know." Marcus made a shooing gesture. "Go. Be charming. Try to remember how." The venue was a converted townhouse on the Upper East Side, the kind of building that communicated wealth through understatement. No garish signage, just a discreet brass plate beside heavy mahogany doors and a man in a black suit checking names against a list on a clipboard. Inside, it was all warm candlelight and murmured conversation and the soft, invisible weight of people trying very hard to seem like they weren't trying at all. The ceilings were high. The flowers were fresh and expensive and placed with the kind of precision that made them look effortless. A string quartet played something Nathan didn't recognize from a corner of the main room. He got a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. He had to drive home, and stood near the entrance for a moment, taking it all in. The room was full of people who looked like they belonged here. That was the only way Nathan could describe it. They had the posture of people who had never once stood in a bathroom wondering if their suits still fit, never once eaten cereal for dinner because the grocery run kept getting pushed to tomorrow, never once fallen asleep on a 4-year-old's bedroom floor because she couldn't sleep, and neither could he, and at some point it was just easier to stay. He felt exactly like what he was, a reasonably put-together accountant from Brooklyn who had arrived at the wrong party. A woman in red materialized at his elbow. Mid-30s, dark hair, the kind of smile that had been practiced until it felt natural. "First time?" she asked. "Is it that obvious?" "A little." She extended her hand. "Diana, corporate law." "Nathan, tax accounting." "Fun crowd we run with," she said dryly, and he almost liked her for that. She walked him through how the evening worked. Assigned tables for the first half, open mingling after dessert, discreet profile cards if you wanted to follow up with someone. Very civilized, very controlled. The kind of environment designed to make something as inherently messy as human attraction feel manageable and low risk, and nothing at all like what it actually was. "Who are you seated with?" Diana asked. Nathan found the table card in his jacket pocket. "Table 7. Diana's expression did something subtle, a micro flicker of something he couldn't quite read. "Ah," she said. "Ah. Table 7 is—" She seemed to choose her next words carefully. "Notable." "Notable how?" Diana nodded toward the far side of the room. "See for yourself." He almost missed her. That was the thing he would think about later, lying awake at 2 in the morning with the particular insomnia that comes from a brain that refuses to stop processing. He almost missed her entirely. Table 7 was positioned near the tall windows that faced the garden, half in candlelight and half in shadow. When Nathan first looked in that direction, he saw a group of well-dressed people standing around it, talking animatedly, glasses raised. He had to look twice before he realized that the woman actually sitting at the table, while everyone else stood, was not part of the conversation happening around her. She was reading. In the middle of a luxury matchmaking event, at a table full of people competing for each other's attention, Victoria Ashford was sitting with perfect posture and reading what appeared to be a briefing document, a pen held loosely in one hand like she might circle something if it warranted circling. She was wearing a dark navy dress, her hair pulled back from her face in a way that was either very simple or very expensive. Nathan couldn't tell which. Small gold earrings, no other jewelry. She didn't look up when someone near her laughed too loudly. She didn't look up when a waiter leaned in to refill the water glass at her elbow. Nathan stood there for a moment and just looked at her. Not the way men usually looked at beautiful women, cataloging, assessing, but with a kind of puzzled recognition. The way you feel when something doesn't match the pattern you expected, and you're not sure yet what that means. He started walking toward table 7. Marcus appeared at his shoulder from nowhere, literally nowhere. Nathan had no idea how his friend had gotten past the door, but there he was, somehow, in a suit Nathan had never seen before, holding a glass of champagne like he'd been there all evening. "That's Victoria Ashford," Marcus said in a low, urgent voice. Nathan didn't stop walking. "Okay. Nathan, do you know who she is? She built Ashford Capital from scratch. Forbes listed her at I'm just going to sit down, Marcus. It's my assigned table." Marcus grabbed his arm. "There's an open seat at table 4. Simone Laurent is there. She's a VP at Morgan Stanley. She's great. She'd be much more—" Nathan gently removed Marcus's hand from his arm. "I'm at table 7. He heard Marcus make a strangled sound behind him as he walked away. Nathan pulled out the chair beside Victoria Ashford and sat down. She didn't look up immediately. She finished the sentence she was reading. He watched her eyes track to the end of the line, and then she capped the pen, folded the document with a clean, practiced motion, and turned to look at him. She had dark eyes, the kind that were taking a very precise inventory of who he was and what he wanted and whether either of those things was going to be worth her time. It wasn't an unfriendly look, but it was very direct, and Nathan got the clear impression she'd had a lot of practice with people who wilted under it. "You're not going to ask if this seat is taken?" she said. "The card with my name on it is right there," Nathan said, nodding at the place setting in front of him. "So I figured the odds were in my favor." Something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile. An acknowledgement. "Fair enough," she said. "Victoria." "Nathan." A pause settled between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted. She glanced at his hands, then his face. Then somewhere slightly past his left shoulder in a way that managed to communicate she'd been doing this all evening and was already tired of it. "Accountant," he said. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'm an accountant. That's what you were about to ask, or something close to it. What do you do? How did you end up here? Why are you at this table?" He shrugged. "Tax accounting, mostly. Small businesses, a few private clients. A friend convinced me to come tonight, against my will. And I genuinely have no idea why I'm at this table, but here I am." She studied him for a moment. "Most people lead with something more impressive." "I don't have anything more impressive." "You could have invented something." "I'm bad at lying," he said. "It makes me sweat." There was a beat of silence. Then Victoria Ashford laughed. Not a polished social laugh, not the carefully calibrated sound he'd been hearing from every direction since he walked in, but a short surprise thing, like it caught her completely off guard. She pressed 2 fingers briefly to her lips as if she could take it back. "That's either extremely honest or a very good opening line," she said. "It's just honest. I know how it sounds." "Sounds like you're not trying to impress me." "I'm not," Nathan said simply. "No offense." "None taken." She tilted her head slightly. "It's actually the most interesting thing anyone said to me all evening." The dinner came in courses. Things Nathan couldn't always identify, but ate without complaint. The conversation moved around the table like weather, sometimes pulling them in, sometimes not. The other guests at table 7 had the polished rhythm of people who networked professionally, who knew how to hold a room, how to drop names with the exact right pressure, how to laugh at precisely the right moment to make the person across from them feel clever. Nathan did none of that. Interestingly, neither did Victoria. "You're not what I expected," he said at some point between the second and third course, when the conversation had narrowed quietly to just the 2 of them. "What did you expect?" she asked. He considered this honestly. "The person everyone in this room thinks you are." She set down her fork. "And who is that?" "Someone who came here to be seen. Someone who makes everyone feel slightly inferior and doesn't feel bad about it." He said it without heat, just observation. "The version of you that makes sense given." He gestured vaguely, encompassing the table, the room, the invisible atmosphere of wealth and reputation that seemed to settle over certain people like a second skin. "All of this." Victoria was quiet for a moment. She turned her wine glass slowly between her fingers. She'd had maybe 2 sips of it all evening, Nathan had noticed. "What am I actually like then?" she asked. "Since you seem to have a theory." "I don't have one yet," he said. "That's why I'm still sitting here." She looked at him steadily. "You have a kid," she said. Not a question. He felt the small jolt of surprise he always felt when people picked up on it before he mentioned it, though he supposed it was probably visible in something about him, some quality of patience or tiredness or groundedness that 4 years of single parenthood had pressed into a person until it became bone deep. "Yeah," he said. "Daughter, Lily, she's 4. "What's she like?" Nathan opened his mouth to give the standard proud parent answer. "She's great, she's funny, she's the best thing that ever happened to me," and then closed it again, because Victoria was watching him with the same focused attention she'd had on that briefing document, and he had the clear sense she would know immediately if he gave her the version he gave strangers at parties. "She named her stuffed rabbit Gerald," he said instead. "Won't explain why. She also insists on wearing 1 red sock and 1 blue sock every single day because she decided matching socks are boring, and she's been doing this for 6 months, and I've completely given up fighting it." He paused. "Last week she told me the moon was following our car home because it wanted to be our friend, and I genuinely didn't know what to say to that." Victoria's expression had shifted into something quieter and more real. Something that wasn't quite a smile, but was close enough that he noticed the difference. "That's a wonderful answer," she said. "She's a wonderful kid," Nathan said. "She didn't get it from me." "What do you mean?" He turned his water glass between his hands. "Her mother and I didn't work out. Lily lives with me full time. Her mom isn't—" He stopped. Started again. "She's not really in the picture, and I'm trying to be enough for Lily on my own, and most days I think I'm doing okay, and some days I'm completely certain I'm getting everything wrong." He said it without drama or performance, like reading from a weather report, just the facts as they stood. "That's the honest version." Victoria was quiet for a moment that stretched just past comfortable. Most men wouldn't say that, she said. What would they say? That they have it all handled, that everything is figured out. She looked briefly out at the room. Nobody ever admits they're afraid of getting it wrong. Are you afraid of getting things wrong? He asked. The question seemed to land differently than she expected. Her eyes came back to him. Almost constantly, she said quietly. Huh. Nathan picked up his water glass. Me too. After dinner, when the room broke apart into open mingling and the ambient noise level climbed and people began the subtle choreography of circulating, Nathan and Victoria stayed at the table. Nobody said anything about it. Nobody had to. They talked about the kind of things people usually save for the third or fourth conversation. Not because they were rushing, but because the small talk had already felt exhausted between them before it started. She told him about growing up in a family where money was the primary language, and love was a thing implied but almost never stated directly. He told her about his father, who died when Nathan was 26, and how he'd spent almost 2 years afterward feeling like a compass that couldn't find north. That's when I found out I was going to be a father, he said. I was 28. Nothing was figured out. Lily's mom was already telling me she didn't see a long-term future for us. And I remember sitting in my car outside the hospital after the first ultrasound, completely alone, and thinking, okay, this is it. Whatever I've been waiting to become, I have to become it now. Victoria was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite categorize. Did you? She asked. Become it? I'm still working on that, he said. Ask me again in about 15 years. A woman appeared at Victoria's elbow. Early 50s, silver-haired, the practiced efficiency of the event coordinator in every line of her posture, and murmured something about circulating, networking, the intent of the evening. Victoria looked at her with polite, absolute impassivity until the woman withdrew. I should probably apologize, Victoria said. I have a reputation for not participating correctly at these things. What's the correct way to participate? Apparently not reading briefing documents at the dinner table. What was the briefing about? Acquisition of a medical tech company in Boston. The board meets Thursday. She paused. I probably shouldn't have told you that. I'm an accountant. I'm legally obligated to find that boring. She laughed again. That same caught-off-guard sound, like laughter was still something that happened to her rather than something she chose. Why did you come tonight? Nathan asked. If you don't mind me asking. The question required real consideration. Victoria looked at the empty space at the center of the table where the flower arrangement had been, a slight furrow between her brows. My head of PR thought it would soften my public image, she said finally. She's been very carefully suggesting I seem more approachable for about 2 years now. And your actual reason? A pause longer than the others. I'm 30 years old, she said, and I genuinely cannot remember the last time I had a conversation with someone who didn't want something from me. She said it flatly, without self-pity, which somehow made it land harder than if she'd been emotional about it. I thought maybe in a room full of people who are all supposedly looking for the same thing, it would feel different. Does it? She looked at him directly. Starting to, she said. When the event officially ended at 11, they were still talking. The room had emptied around them gradually, the way water drains, slowly, and then all at once, until the catering staff were moving between tables with quiet efficiency, and the coordinator was giving them increasingly pointed looks from across the room, and the string quartet had packed up and left without either of them noticing. Nathan checked his watch and felt the small jolt of guilt every parent knows at a certain hour of the night. I should get back. Marcus is with Lily, and he has a very loose interpretation of bedtime rules. Victoria stood as well. In heels she was nearly his height, which he hadn't registered while they were sitting. Marcus is your friend who made you come tonight? She asked. Against my will, yes. He did you a favor, she said. Then, as if the words had surprised her too, she looked briefly away. Nathan found a business card in his wallet. The plain kind, just his name and number, nothing impressive about it, and held it out. If you ever want to continue this conversation somewhere that doesn't require me to wear a tie, I can barely breathe in. She took it, looked at him. I don't usually do this, she said. I know. I mean it. My assistant manages my schedule. I have a policy about, She stopped. I'm making this complicated. It's just coffee, Nathan said. Or not. No pressure either way. Victoria turned the card over once between her fingers. She had, he noticed, the hands of someone who worked constantly. Not rough, but purposeful, like her hands were always occupied with something, even when they were still. I'll call you, she said. Okay. It might not be for a few days. I have the Boston situation and the board meeting Thursday and… Victoria, he said. She stopped. It's okay, he said simply. I'll be there when you call. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, nodded at her once, not weighted, not loaded with anything, just a simple acknowledgement between two people at the end of a real conversation, and walked out of the room. In the car on the way home, he sat at a red light on Fifth Avenue and thought about the way she'd laughed, the surprise quality of it, like she'd genuinely forgotten she was allowed to. He thought about the briefing document folded in her purse, the wine she hadn't drunk, the way she'd described being 30 years old and unable to remember the last honest conversation she'd had. He thought about Lily and Gerald, the rabbit in the moon that followed their car home because it wanted to be their friend. The light turned green. He drove. Marcus was asleep on the couch when Nathan got in, Lily's cartoon channel still running on the television at low volume. Nathan turned it off, checked on Lily, deeply asleep, one arm thrown over Gerald, one red sock and one blue sock visible where the blanket had shifted down, and stood in her doorway for a long moment in the dark. He didn't know what tonight had been. He was too careful a person to call it anything yet. He'd learned the hard way that naming things too early was how you got ahead of yourself, and getting ahead of himself was a luxury he couldn't afford with a 4-year-old depending on him for everything. He had too many responsibilities, too much already at stake, to go chasing something that wasn't real, or wasn't ready, or wasn't going to hold. But he stood in his daughter's doorway in the dark and felt, very quietly, underneath everything else, something that had been absent for long enough that he'd almost stopped expecting it would come back. Not hope, exactly. Something smaller. The possibility of it. He pulled Lily's door gently closed and went to bed. In her penthouse 50 blocks north, Victoria Ashford stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city, still in her navy dress, holding a glass of water she'd poured and forgotten to drink. His business card was on the counter behind her. Nathan Cross. Cross Accounting. 718-555-0142. Plain white card. No logo. Slightly bent at one corner like it had been living in his wallet for a while between more important things. She'd sat across from senators at fundraising dinners. She'd negotiated with men who ran sovereign wealth funds. She'd held her own in rooms where the wrong word could move markets, and she'd never once felt like she didn't belong there. She had built everything she had from the ground up, floor by floor, decision by decision, and she knew exactly who she was in every room she walked into. And she was standing at her window at midnight thinking about an accountant from Brooklyn who ordered water at an open bar, admitted out loud to being scared, and told her about a 4-year-old's theory about the moon, without any apparent awareness of how extraordinary that was, without performing it, without trying to make himself seem like anything other than exactly what he was. She picked up the card from the counter. She put it in the small ceramic dish by the kitchen island where she kept things she didn't want to lose. Then she went back to the briefing document and the Boston acquisition and the 57 things that needed her attention before Thursday morning. She got through 2 paragraphs, stopped, turned the page, stared at it without reading a single word, closed it. 3 days later, she called. She called on a Friday afternoon, which Nathan later decided was a very Victoria thing to do. Not the weekend, which would have felt too personal. Not Monday, which would have felt too businesslike. Friday, right at the edge of both, where it could still be either one depending on how the conversation went. He was in the middle of reconciling a client's quarterly statements when his phone buzzed on the desk. Unknown number, Manhattan area code. He almost let it go to voicemail. Nathan Cross, he answered. A brief pause. Then, "You said you'd be there when I called." He recognized her voice immediately, which surprised him slightly. He'd only heard it for a few hours, and yet there it was, completely unmistakable. That particular quality of control in it, like every word was chosen before it left her mouth. I did say that, he said. I'm calling. I noticed. Another pause, shorter this time. The Boston acquisition closed yesterday. The board meeting went well. I have a Saturday morning with nothing scheduled, which apparently my assistant considers a minor emergency, but I'm choosing to regard as an opportunity. A beat. I thought about what you said. About coffee. What specifically did I say about coffee? That it was just coffee, no pressure. That still stands, Nathan said. Good. She said it quickly, like she'd been prepared for him to have changed his mind. There's a place on West 11th I like. Quiet. Good espresso. Not the kind of place where anyone will bother me. That last part sounds important. It is, she said, without elaboration. They agreed on 10 o'clock Saturday morning. She gave him the name of the cafe. He wrote it on the back of a client folder because he couldn't find a post-it, and then spent the rest of the afternoon pretending to focus on the quarterly statements while the name sat in his peripheral vision like a small, distracting light. The cafe was exactly what she'd described. Quiet, narrow, tucked between a florist and a laundromat on a block that felt removed from the city's usual volume. Dark wood, low ceilings, the kind of place that had been there long enough to stop caring whether anyone noticed it. Nathan arrived 4 minutes early and ordered a black coffee and sat at a corner table and tried very hard not to look at the door every 30 seconds. Victoria arrived at exactly 10. She was wearing jeans and a dark gray sweater, hair down, no visible armor of any kind, and she looked so different from the woman in the navy dress that Nathan had to consciously recalibrate. Not less impressive, just different. More like a person and less like a figure. She sat down across from him and looked at the coffee he'd already ordered. You didn't wait. I ordered for me. I didn't know what you'd want. Most people would have guessed. I didn't want to guess wrong, he said. What do you actually want? She looked at the small chalkboard menu on the wall. Cortado. No sugar. He flagged down the server. She watched him do it without comment, but something about her posture eased fractionally, the way a person settles when they realize they're not going to have to perform for the next hour. You look different, she said when the server had gone. No tie, he said. That's not all of it. I'm in my natural habitat, Nathan said. Small cafe, bad lighting, someone else's financial records giving me a headache. This is basically my whole life. The financial records aren't here. No, but the headache is. He said it plainly, and she smiled, a real one this time, not the controlled almost smile from the dinner. It changed her face in a way that was slightly startling, like a window opening in a wall you hadn't realized was solid. Her cortado arrived. She wrapped both hands around the small glass and looked at him with that same precise attention he remembered from the dinner table. Tell me something true, she said. About what? Anything. I spend most of my days in rooms full of people saying things that are technically accurate but not actually true. I want to know what a real conversation sounds like. Nathan considered this seriously. Okay, true thing. I almost didn't come today. Why? Because you're... He paused, choosing the word carefully. Significant. And I've learned that wanting something significant is where I tend to make bad decisions. She didn't look away. What kind of bad decisions? The kind you make when you're 26 and lonely, and you convince yourself that wanting something hard enough is the same as it being a good idea. He looked at his coffee. Lily's mother was a bad decision I made for good reasons. It took me a while to untangle those two things. Victoria was quiet for a moment. What were the good reasons? She was brilliant, ambitious. She knew exactly where she was going, and I thought that kind of certainty was something you could borrow from a person. He shook his head slightly. Turns out you can't. Turns out certainty is a private thing. How long were you together? 3 years. The last one was mostly just inertia. He looked up. Then Lily happened, and everything that had been vague suddenly had very specific consequences. Do you regret it? Which part? Any of it. Nathan thought about Lily and her mismatched socks, naming the moon her friend. No, he said. That's the complicated part. I don't regret any of it, even the bad decisions, because of where they landed. But I also can't tell if that's wisdom or just rationalization. Victoria turned her glass slowly. I think it might be both, she said. Simultaneously. That's either a very smart answer or a way of avoiding the question. Probably both of those simultaneously, too, she said, and he laughed, and she looked briefly pleased with herself in a way that seemed unfamiliar on her face, like a muscle she didn't use often. They stayed at that table for 2 hours. The morning crowd thinned around them, and the light shifted, and the server came by twice to see if they wanted anything else, and both times they ordered more coffee without really deciding to, just to extend the premise of being there. She told him about Ashford Capital, not the version on the company website, not the Forbes profile version, but the actual version. How she'd started it at 24 with money borrowed from the only person in her family who'd taken her seriously, her maternal uncle, a retired engineer who'd handed her a check and said, "Don't make me regret this," in a tone that made it clear he had complete faith she wouldn't. How the first year had been so close to catastrophic that she'd slept on a cot in the office for 3 months because she was afraid that going home meant losing track of something critical. How success, when it finally arrived, felt less like triumph and more like the ground finally stopping moving. "Did you ever celebrate?" Nathan asked. "What do you mean?" "When things actually worked. Did you stop and let yourself feel good about it, or did you just move to the next thing?" The question seemed to catch her somewhere vulnerable. She looked at her hands for a moment. "I moved to the next thing," she said. "Why?" "Because stopping felt dangerous." She said it simply, like a fact. Like if I stopped, I'd see how much I'd missed while I was building everything, and I didn't want to see that yet. "Do you want to see it now?" She looked up at him. "I'm not sure. I think maybe that's why I came tonight. Last week, I mean, to the event." She corrected herself with a slight awkwardness that was more humanizing than anything else she'd said. "I think I was starting to wonder what I'd traded away without noticing." Nathan didn't answer immediately. He let the thing she'd said sit there because it deserved the space. "For what it's worth," he said eventually, "from the outside, it doesn't look like you traded anything. It looks like you built something real. The question of what it cost. That's separate." "Can they be separated?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "I think that's the hard part." She nodded slowly, looking somewhere past his shoulder. "You're easier to talk to than I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone intimidated, or someone trying very hard not to be intimidated. People usually do one or the other around me." "Which one is more exhausting?" "The second one," she said immediately. "By far." "I'm not intimidated," Nathan said. "I want to be clear that's not indifference. He paused. "You're clearly remarkable. That's obvious. But remarkable people are still people." She looked at him for a moment. "You actually believe that?" "I actually believe that," he confirmed. "My last serious relationship ended partly because the man I was with stopped seeing me as a person somewhere around year 2, she said. It came out matter of fact, like she'd processed it enough times that the edge was gone, but Nathan could hear the thing underneath it, the careful distance she'd put between herself and the memory. "I became a status, something adjacent to him that reflected well, and I didn't notice for a long time because I was too busy working to pay attention to what was happening in my own house." "How did you figure it out?" "He gave an interview to a financial magazine. They asked him what he was most proud of." A pause. "He listed the apartment first, then a car. I was third. Described as, she made a brief, humorless sound that wasn't quite a laugh. A considerable asset in both personal and professional contexts." Nathan said nothing for a moment, then, "That's a terrible thing to do to someone." "It was," she agreed. "The worst part was that he genuinely didn't understand why I was upset. He thought he'd complimented me." "Did you tell him why you were upset?" "I tried. He kept saying he didn't see the problem." She looked up. "That was when I knew it was over. Not because he'd said something careless, because when I tried to explain why it hurt, he literally could not follow the logic." Nathan turned his coffee cup slowly. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past and the windows shivered slightly. The cafe had gotten quieter. "The person who can't understand why they hurt you," he said. "That's the specific loneliness, not the being hurt part, the explaining part." Victoria looked at him with an expression he couldn't entirely read, Something careful and intent, like she was deciding whether to trust that he'd actually understood that or was just performing understanding. Yes, she said, exactly that. They walked out into the late morning together, neither of them having decided to extend the conversation, but both of them apparently unwilling to end it. The November air had a real bite to it, and their breath showed in small clouds, and the city was doing its Saturday thing around them. Slower, louder in different ways, more human. They walked half a block without particular direction before Nathan said, "I need to pick up Lily from my mother's by noon." "Of course," Victoria said, and something in her voice was careful in a way that told him she was giving him a clean exit if he wanted it. He didn't take it. "You could walk with me to the subway," he said. "It's 4 blocks." She walked with him 6. At the corner where he needed to go down and she needed to go somewhere else, they stopped. The city moved around them with complete indifference to the moment. "Thank you for calling," he said. "Thank you for picking up." "Do you want to do this again?" he asked. Direct, because he'd decided on the walk that directness was the thing with her. That she was surrounded constantly by indirection and subtext and people managing their words carefully around her. And the most honest thing he could do was just ask the actual question. She looked at him for a moment. "Yes," she said. "I think I do." "Okay," he said. "I'll be in touch." He went down the subway steps. She stood at the corner for a moment after he'd disappeared, the wind picking up off the street, and then she turned and walked back toward her side of the city. And she did not look at her phone once the entire way home, which was, for her, genuinely unusual. The second time they met, it was dinner. Her suggestion, a restaurant in the West Village that was small and not particularly famous, and clearly chosen for its privacy rather than its prestige. She was already there when he arrived, already had a glass of water, was not reading a briefing document this time, which he noticed and didn't comment on. The third time was a Sunday afternoon. She'd texted, actual text, not a call, which felt like its own kind of progress, asking if he had time for a walk in the park. He'd texted back asking which park. She'd said Prospect Park. He'd said that was in Brooklyn. She'd said she was aware of that. He'd met her at the entrance at 2 o'clock and found her in a wool coat and flat boots, looking slightly uncertain in the way a person looks when they've arrived somewhere unfamiliar and are working out the geometry of it. "You've never been to Prospect Park?" he asked. "I've been to Central Park." "That's completely different." "Is it?" "Come on," he said. "I'll show you." They walked for almost 2 hours. The park was mostly empty in the November cold, which suited both of them. Lily had come along. Nathan had considered leaving her with Marcus, then decided against it for reasons he couldn't fully articulate. Some instinct about not keeping the two separate indefinitely, about not building something on one side of his life that the other side didn't know existed. Lily walked between them for a while and then ahead of them, and then tried to climb every rock she encountered, which required intermittent intervention. Victoria watched Lily climb a particularly ambitious boulder with an expression Nathan couldn't immediately categorize. Something quiet and interested, like she was observing a process she didn't entirely understand but found genuinely compelling. "She's not afraid of anything," Victoria said. "She's afraid of vacuum cleaners," Nathan said, "and the sound the radiator makes at night. But she hides it well." Victoria almost smiled. "How do you know she's hiding it?" "She gets very still and very calm right before she starts crying. She has this thing where she won't let herself look scared until she absolutely can't help it." He watched Lily navigate the top of the rock with total concentration. "Reminds me of someone, actually." Victoria looked at him sideways. "I'm not going to agree with that out loud," she said. "You don't have to." Lily scrambled down the other side of the rock and ran back to them, cheeks red, utterly delighted with herself. She looked at Victoria with the frank, unselfconscious assessment of a child who has not yet learned to soften her gaze. "You have nice hair," Lily said. "Thank you," Victoria said, and her voice did something careful and genuine at the same time. "Mine is better," Lily added, and turned and ran toward the next rock. Nathan covered his mouth with one hand. Victoria made a sound beside him that was unmistakably a laugh, quiet and real. "She's right," Nathan said. "Your hair is good, but hers is objectively more interesting." "I will not argue with a 4-year-old's hair assessment," Victoria said. That way lies only defeat. They walked. The afternoon light went thin and gold through the bare trees, and Lily found a stick she declared was magic, and the city sounds came and went depending on which way the wind was moving, and neither of them said anything particularly important for long stretches. And it was, Nathan thought, and then tried not to think about it too directly, nice. Just genuinely nice, without effort or strategy or anyone performing anything. That was the thing he kept coming back to. With most people, there was a version of themselves they brought to social situations. Slightly adjusted, slightly edited, the volume on certain things turned up and others turned down. Nathan did it too. He knew he did. He'd gotten good at the particular social presentation of competent single father, warm but measured, got it mostly together, nothing to worry about here. But something about Victoria made the editing feel unnecessary. Maybe because she was so clearly not performing anything herself. Maybe because she asked questions that didn't have polite answers and seemed to genuinely want the impolite ones. He wasn't sure yet what to do with that, but he noticed it. By early December, they'd settled into an irregular rhythm, not scheduled exactly, but not random either. A text on a Tuesday. I have 2 hours Thursday afternoon. A call on a Sunday. I'm walking past a bookstore. There's a copy of something I think you'd actually like. Do you want me to grab it? The rhythm of two people who were both busy and both, without acknowledging it directly, rearranging things slightly to make room. She met Marcus once, accidentally, when he stopped by Nathan's apartment to drop off something Lily had left at his place, and Victoria happened to be there. The first time she'd been to the apartment, a thing Nathan had been slightly nervous about in a way he couldn't entirely justify. As if she would somehow find the modest Brooklyn apartment lacking in a way that would change something. She hadn't. She'd looked around at the low bookshelves overflowing with a mixture of accounting textbooks and children's picture books, the crayon drawings stuck to the refrigerator with mismatched magnets, the general evidence of a small person living there with great enthusiasm and very little sense of order, and she'd looked at it all with an expression that was harder to read than he expected. Not superior, not patronizing, something more careful than either of those. Marcus had walked in, seen Victoria Ashford standing in Nathan's kitchen, and done a visible double-take that Nathan felt secondhand embarrassment about for several days afterward. Marcus, Nathan said, this is Victoria. I know who she is, Marcus said, then caught himself. Hi, I'm Marcus. Nathan's friend, his very normal, completely unimpressive friend. He's told me about you, Victoria said, which was slightly generous since what Nathan had mostly said was that Marcus had terrible boundaries and excellent intentions. Good things, I hope, Marcus said. He said you make Lily ice cream for breakfast. Before bed, Marcus said immediately. Then, no, that is not... I don't do that. Lily appeared from the hallway at this exact moment. Uncle Marcus, she said solemnly, you told me it was a secret. Nathan watched Marcus try to formulate a response and fail completely, and glanced at Victoria and found her watching the whole scene with the expression of someone who was actively trying not to laugh and losing the fight. After Marcus had left, with considerably less dignity than he'd arrived with, Lily climbed onto the couch beside Victoria with the particular confidence of a child who has decided without consultation that someone is acceptable. Do you like books? Lily asked. Very much, Victoria said. Daddy reads me books. He does the voices wrong, but he tries. Lily looked at Nathan with an expression of fond criticism. He makes the dragon sound like a regular man. In my defense, Nathan said, I don't know what dragons actually sound like. They sound like this, Lily said, and produced a noise that was more frog than dragon, but delivered with such absolute conviction that neither adult questioned it. Victoria looked at Lily for a moment, and there was something in her face that she didn't entirely control. Something that went past amused, past charmed, into a territory Nathan couldn't name. Something that looked like recognition. Like she was seeing something she hadn't expected to find. She looked up and found Nathan watching her, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Then Lily demanded to be read to, and the moment dissolved, and Nathan pulled a book off the shelf and sat on Lily's other side, and did the dragon in the voice of a regular man, and Victoria sat quietly beside them and did not read a briefing document, and the afternoon went past the window while none of them paid attention to the time. December moved through itself. The city put up lights and the air went sharp, and the spaces between their meetings got slightly shorter without either of them explicitly deciding to shorten them. They had dinner and they had coffee and they walked and they talked on the phone at hours that were slightly too late to be casual, and a particular quality of comfort developed between them. The kind that comes from a person seeing you in multiple contexts and continuing anyway, from someone knowing the version of you that runs out of patience sometimes, that gets tired, that doesn't always have the right answer, and not adjusting their opinion of you downward. One evening, late November, going into December, they were walking back from dinner, a place in Park Slope Nathan liked, unpretentious, good pasta. The owner knew him by name, and Victoria said out of a silence that had been comfortable for about half a block, "Can I ask you something personal?" "You've been asking me personal things since the first night," Nathan said. "Why ask permission now?" She seemed to consider this, because this one I'm not sure I should ask. "Then ask it, and we'll find out." A pause. Their breath made small clouds in the cold air. The neighborhood was quiet, Saturday evening quiet, people mostly inside. "Do you ever get lonely?" she asked. "I don't mean the obvious kind. I mean the kind where you're not alone. You have Lily, you have Marcus, you have people, but something underneath is still—" She stopped, started again. "I mean that very specific kind." Nathan walked a few steps before answering. "Yeah," he said. "I know exactly the kind you mean." "When?" "Nights, mostly. After Lily's asleep and the apartment goes quiet. I'm used to it now. But it took a long time to stop fighting it." He looked at the sidewalk. "The first year after her mom left, I used to turn the television on just to have noise in the room. Just so it didn't feel so much like, I don't know, like evidence." "Evidence of what?" "That I was there alone." He shrugged, a slight motion. "That sounds worse than it was." "I don't think it does," she said quietly. "What about you?" he asked. "You brought it up." Another beat, their footsteps on the sidewalk, the distant sound of traffic 2 blocks over. "My apartment is 4,200 square feet, she said. "I designed it myself, or had it designed to my specifications, which amounts to the same thing. It's exactly what I would have wanted at 25. A monument to the idea of having made it." She paused. "At night it sounds like being inside a very expensive seashell." Nathan didn't say anything. He understood what she meant, the particular hollow quality of having built something exactly the way you wanted it, and then standing in it alone. "I keep the city noise on," she said, "through the vents. I had the sound system configured to run ambient city sound at low volume, so there's something else in the room." She said it without apparent embarrassment, but he could hear the edge of something. Not shame exactly, but the vulnerability of admitting a coping mechanism to another person. "My assistant thinks it's a white noise machine. I've never corrected her." Nathan thought about his television running in the dark. "City noise," he said. "Yes. I use television." "Same principle," she said. "Same principle," he agreed. They walked another half block. At the corner she stopped and turned to look at him, and in the orange light of the street lamp she looked very much like a person who had just said something she'd been carrying alone for a long time. "I've never told anyone that," she said. "I know." "You knew?" "I could tell." She looked at him for a moment. The city moved around them without caring. A cab passed. Someone's window was lit warm yellow 2 floors up. "I'm glad I called you," she said. Not a romantic declaration, just a fact, delivered like one. "I'm glad you called me too," Nathan said, just as plainly. They stood there at the corner a moment longer than necessary, and then she pulled her coat tighter against the cold and said she'd text him. And he said okay, and she walked toward the car that was waiting for her, and he walked toward the subway, and neither of them said what was becoming increasingly obvious in the space between every conversation they had. They weren't naming it yet. But it was there, the way winter is there before the first snow, not visible, not official, but already decided. The thing about not naming something is that it doesn't stop growing just because you haven't given it a word. January came in cold and indifferent, the way New York Januaries do, stripping everything down to its structural elements, bare trees, gray sky, the city's bones showing through. Nathan noticed the season changing in the specific way a person notices things when they're paying attention to something else, peripherally, almost accidentally, while his actual attention was somewhere it had been spending a lot of time lately. They had not talked about what this was. By some unspoken agreement, both of them had been leaving that particular door closed, not locked, not barricaded, just quietly, carefully closed. The way you leave a door closed when you're not sure what's on the other side and you're not ready to find out. Nathan told himself this was sensible. He had Lily to think about. He had the particular caution of someone who had learned that rushing towards something that felt significant was exactly how you ended up with consequences that lasted years. He was 32 years old, and he knew the difference between feeling something and acting on it wisely. He told himself all of this regularly and with genuine conviction, and then Victoria would say something, not even something significant, sometimes just an observation about a book she was reading or a detail she'd noticed on the walk between her office and her car. And he would feel the door move on its hinges, and he'd have to remind himself again why it was still closed. She was having her own version of the same argument, though he didn't know that yet. What he did know, by late January, was that the rhythm between them had shifted in ways too specific to be accidental. She started texting differently, less formally, the complete sentences giving way to the kind of shorthand that develops between people who've talked enough that context is assumed. He called her on a Wednesday evening just to tell her something funny Lily had done, and the call lasted an hour and 20 minutes, and at no point did either of them remark on this. She sent him an article about a small accounting firm in Chicago that had developed a new approach to small business tax structures, with a note that said, "Thought you'd find this interesting," and he read it and called her, and they argued about one section of it for 40 minutes in a way that felt, he had no better word for it, alive. Like the particular electricity of two people who are well matched, finding the edges where they push back against each other. He was not good at pretending things weren't happening. He'd never been good at that. It was one of his less convenient qualities. What finally cracked things open was not a grand moment. It rarely is. It was a Thursday evening in the first week of February, and Nathan was at his desk at 9:30 at night with a tax deadline bearing down on him, and 3 clients whose records were in varying states of disaster, and Lily had had a bad day at preschool. Something about a friend who hadn't wanted to play with her, the specific cruelty of 4-year-olds who do not yet know they are being cruel. And she'd cried at dinner and then fallen asleep on the couch instead of her bed because Nathan hadn't had the heart to make her move. And he'd carried her to her room and come back and sat down at his desk and looked at his work and found that he could not make himself care about any of it. He picked up his phone, put it down, picked it up again. It was late. She had an early board meeting Friday. He knew her schedule loosely by now, the way you absorb someone's life when you're in regular contact with it. He called anyway. She picked up on the second ring, which meant she was awake, which meant she was working. "It's late," she said by way of greeting. "I know. Are you busy?" "I'm always busy." A pause. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," he said. He stopped. The apartment was quiet around him. Lily asleep, the city doing its muffled nighttime thing outside. "I just wanted to hear your voice," he said. "That's all. That's the whole reason." Silence on the line for a moment. "Okay," she said. Her voice had changed register slightly. Not softer exactly, but less guarded. "I'm here. How's the board meeting prep?" "Tedious. Harrison keeps sending me revised slide decks at 11 at night as if I'm going to review them in real time." A sound that was almost a sigh. "How's Lily?" "She had a hard day. A friend at school excluded her from something, and she didn't have the language for how that felt, so it just came out as crying at the dinner table." He leaned back in his chair. "I tried to explain that people sometimes do things that aren't about you. They're about them. And she looked at me and said, 'Daddy, that doesn't make me feel better.' And she was completely right. She's 4 and she already knows when someone is giving her a platitude." "I know, I'm in trouble." Victoria made a sound that was almost a laugh. "What did you do?" "We ate ice cream and watched a nature documentary about penguins. She fell asleep on the couch, which is where I left her until I moved her to bed 20 minutes ago." "Penguins," Victoria said. "She finds them very reassuring, the way they walk, I think." "The waddle." "Yeah." A comfortable silence settled on the line, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. "Nathan," Victoria said. "Yeah." Another pause. He could hear her moving, the small sound of her shifting position, what might have been a chair. "What are we doing?" she said. Not accusatory, not even exactly a question. More like something she'd been carrying around and had finally just set down on the table between them. Nathan didn't answer immediately. He looked at the ceiling. "I don't know," he said. "But I know it's something." "That's not very specific?" "No," he agreed. "It's not." "I'm not good at this," she said. It came out plain and slightly reluctant, the way admissions come when a person has been holding them for a while. "I want to be clear about that. I don't have a good track record with things that aren't." She paused, and he could hear her finding the words. "With things that aren't in my control. I know how to build things. Strategies, structures, systems. I know how to manage variables. I am not good at being a variable myself." "I'm not asking you to be anything," Nathan said. "I know you're not. That's part of what's confusing." A beat. "I'm used to people who want something. That's the baseline I know how to operate from. Someone always wants something. Access, proximity, a meeting, a favor, reflected prestige. I know how to manage that. I know how to stay appropriate distances from it." Her voice was careful but honest. "You've never wanted anything from me." "That's not true," Nathan said. "I want your company. I want to talk to you. I want to know what you think about things." He paused. "I want to know what you're like when you're not managing everything." "I'm not sure I know what that looks like," she said. "You do," he said. "I've seen it. In the park with Lily, when you thought I wasn't watching. On the phone, when you don't feel like you're being evaluated. You go quiet in a different way." He stopped, aware he was saying more than he'd planned. "I like that version." The line was quiet for a moment. "I've been telling myself this is a friendship," she said. "I've been telling myself that too." "Is it?" "I think it started as one," Nathan said carefully. "I don't know exactly when it stopped being just that, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't know the difference." She didn't respond immediately. He waited because he'd learned that her silences were processing time, not absence. "I'm scared," she said finally. Low, almost clipped, like the word cost her something to release. "I want you to know that. This isn't me being evasive or playing something. I'm genuinely scared of what it means if I stop being careful about this." "What does it mean?" "That I actually want something I can't control the outcome of." She exhaled. "That's not my preferred position." "No," he said. "Mine either." A pause. "But here we are." "Here we are," she agreed. Neither of them said anything for a moment. The night sat around both of them in their separate apartments, 50 blocks apart, both awake when they should have been sleeping. "I'm not going to ask you to decide anything tonight," Nathan said. "That's not why I called." "I know," she said. "You called because you wanted to hear my voice." "Yeah." A beat. "I'm glad you did," she said quietly. They talked for another 40 minutes about nothing in particular. The Penguin documentary, a restaurant she'd been to for a client dinner that week that had served the worst risotto she'd ever encountered. A book Nathan was reading that she'd already read 3 years ago. Her strong and specific opinions about his interpretation of one of its central arguments, which were wrong, but entertainingly wrong. By the time they hung up, it was past 11, and neither of them had resolved anything, and everything was exactly as undefined as it had been at the start of the call. But something had shifted, the way weight shifts when you acknowledge it's there. The following week, Victoria's name came up at a dinner Nathan had with Marcus. The two of them at a bar in Cobble Hill, the kind of low-key place where they'd been coming for years, the bartender who knew their usual orders and had the social intelligence to leave them alone. "So," Marcus said. "So," Nathan said. "Are we going to talk about it?" "Talk about what?" Marcus gave him the look, the long-suffering, I have known you for 15 years look that needed no additional annotation. "You called her at 9:30 on a Thursday to hear her voice," he said. "I know this because you told me about it at the time and seemed confused about what it meant, which I found baffling." "I wasn't confused," Nathan said. "You said, and I'm quoting, 'I don't know what's happening, Marcus.'" That's a different kind of confusion. Marcus picked up his beer. Nathan, you're in it. I'm aware. Does she know that? She knows something, Nathan said. It's complicated. Her history with relationships is she's been hurt in ways that made her very good at protecting herself. And I don't want to push anything before she's Nathan. What? Stop managing it, Marcus said. You're doing the thing where you make a very careful plan to protect everyone, including yourself, and then execute it so carefully that nothing actually happens. That's a very specific criticism. I've known you for 15 years, Marcus said. You do this. You protect Lily, you protect your clients, you protect your feelings, you protect other people's feelings about your feelings. At some point, you have to just be in the thing without managing it. Nathan looked at his beer. I have a kid, he said. I can't just... Lily loves her, Marcus said simply. Nathan looked up. I've seen them together twice, Marcus said. Your daughter, who is suspicious of everyone and has very specific criteria for who she allows near her stuffed rabbit, treats Victoria like she's been around her whole life. That's not nothing. Nathan was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. That's part of what scares me. Why does that scare you? Because if this goes wrong, it's not just me, Nathan said. It's Lily too. And I can't do that to her. I can't let someone into her life and then have it. He stopped. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You can't guarantee anything, he said, not unkindly. You know that. You can't protect Lily from everything that might hurt. The best you can do is be careful and honest and pay attention. He paused. And you're doing all of those things. So. Nathan didn't respond. He turned his glass on the bar and thought about the phone call and what Victoria had said. I'm scared. The way it had come out plain, stripped of performance, just the fact of it. Yeah, he said eventually. I know. What happened next happened because of a charity gala, which Nathan would later find both appropriate and slightly absurd as the setting for a turning point. Victoria's company was one of the sponsors. She had mentioned it in passing, the kind of event she attended because her PR team required it, the kind of evening she'd normally get through with professional efficiency and leave early. She had not invited Nathan. He had not expected her to. These were two different worlds, and they both knew it, and they had managed so far by meeting in the spaces between those worlds. Coffee shops, parks, his apartment, neutral ground. The complication arrived in the form of a photograph. Nathan saw it on a Friday morning, a week and a half after the phone call, on his phone while he was waiting for Lily's preschool door to open. A gossip-adjacent news site. Not something he read, but it had come up in a search for something else. Had a photo from the gala. Victoria, in a silver dress, standing beside a man Nathan recognized from the business press as Daniel Mercer, 45, private equity, recently divorced, someone in the same stratosphere as Victoria in the way that the people in her professional world existed in the same stratosphere as each other. The photo was captioned with something speculative and vapid. Nathan looked at it for approximately 4 seconds, felt something cold and specific move through his chest, and put his phone in his pocket. He was fine. This was not a situation that warranted being not fine. They had not defined anything. She had not made him any promises. He had explicitly told her there was no pressure. He had meant that. He was mostly fine. He didn't contact her that day. He told himself this was because he was busy, which was technically true and also completely not the reason. He was quiet on Saturday. Sunday, she texted in the afternoon. Are you around this week? And he answered yes, and they made plans for Tuesday evening, and he spent Monday convincing himself that the cold thing in his chest was just the weather. Tuesday. A restaurant in the West Village they'd been to twice before. Small, reliable, the kind of place where the lighting was good enough to see each other's faces clearly. He was fine for most of dinner. They talked about a deal her company was closing, a situation with a client of his that had turned unexpectedly complicated, something Lily had said that week that had made him laugh on the subway. It was normal. It was easy in the way their dinners had become easy, and that ease itself was a kind of answer to a question, if he'd been paying attention the right way. He was fine until she mentioned the gala. Not strategically, just in context. She'd said something about Daniel Mercer in relation to a business matter, a potential co-investment her board was considering, and she used his name without apparent awareness of the photograph, without apparent awareness that Nathan had seen it and had been carrying the cold thing in his chest for 5 days. Nathan was quiet for a moment. "I saw a photo," he said. "From the gala." Victoria looked at him. "What photo?" "You and Mercer." A brief pause. Her face was very still. "It was a sponsored event. We're in discussions about a potential co-investment. There were photographers." "I know," Nathan said. "I'm not—" He stopped. Started again. "I don't have any claim on your time or who you're photographed with. I want to be clear that I know that." "But," she said. He looked at her directly. "But I haven't been honest about something, and I think I need to be because I'm bad at carrying things and not saying them, and I've been doing it for 5 days and it's starting to affect my ability to be straightforward with you, which I care about more than protecting myself from an awkward conversation." Victoria set down her fork. She gave him her full attention in the way she did when something mattered, the complete focusing of herself on the thing in front of her. "I'm not interested in anyone else," Nathan said. "I haven't been since October. I don't know what the right word is for what this is, and I meant it when I said I wasn't going to push you toward anything before you're ready. But I needed you to know that, because I saw that photo and I felt something that I don't feel like a friend feels, and if I don't say that, I'm going to keep sitting here being slightly dishonest, which I don't want to do." Silence. The restaurant moved quietly around them. Someone at a nearby table laughed at something. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. Her expression was not the controlled, evaluating look she'd had in the early days. It was something more open than that, and more uncertain, and the uncertainty was somehow the most honest thing he'd seen on her face. "Daniel Mercer is a business contact," she said. "That photograph was 2 minutes at a cocktail reception. I left at 9:15 and went home and read a report." She paused. "Alone. In my 4,200 square foot apartment with the city noise on." "Okay," Nathan said. "I need you to know that I haven't been interested in anyone else either," she said. Her voice was steady, but there was effort in the steadiness. "Not since October. She stopped. "I've been treating this like something I could think my way through. Like if I analyzed it carefully enough, I could figure out the risk-adjusted—" She made a brief, dismissive motion with one hand. "Which is a ridiculous way to approach this, and I know it, but it's how I'm built." "I know how you're built," he said. "I'm not asking you to be different. I know you're not." She looked at him steadily. "That's the thing, Nathan. You've never asked me to be different. Nobody—" She stopped, took a breath that was not quite steady. "Very few people have just let me be what I am without wanting to change it or capitalize on it or manage it." "You're worth knowing as you are," he said simply. "That's not a complicated calculation." Something moved across her face, a flash of something raw and unguarded, quickly composed but not quite fully, the way a person looks when they've been told something they needed to hear and weren't prepared for how much they needed it. "I don't know how to do this well," she said. "I want you to understand that going in, I've been alone long enough that I have habits that are going to be inconvenient. I work too much. I go quiet when I'm processing things instead of communicating, which I know is maddening. I'm not—" She looked briefly frustrated with herself. "I'm not easy." "I have a 4-year-old, Nathan said. "My baseline for difficult has been recalibrated." She almost smiled. Almost. "I'm serious," she said. "So am I," he said. "I'm not asking for easy. I'm not easy either. I'm tired most of the time, and I overthink everything, and I have this habit of protecting people from things without asking if they want to be protected, which my therapist would tell you is a whole issue." He paused. "I also do other people's taxes for a living, which is genuinely unglamorous." "I know what you do for a living," she said. "I'm just saying, full disclosure." She looked at him across the table in the low restaurant light, the remains of their dinner between them, the city doing its thing outside the window, and he could see her working through something. The particular internal negotiation of a person who has learned to be careful deciding whether to stop being careful. "I don't want to be managed," she said finally, "if this goes anywhere. I don't want to be handled or positioned or— I've had a relationship where I was a variable in someone else's equation, and I cannot do that again." "You're not a variable," Nathan said. "You're the whole problem I'm trying to solve." He said it without thinking. and then heard it, and felt the specific discomfort of having been more honest than he'd planned. But she didn't look away. "That might be the most accidentally romantic thing anyone has ever said to me," she said. "I didn't mean it to be romantic. I meant it mathematically." "I know," she said. "That's why it worked." They paid the bill and walked out into the February cold, and this time when they reached the corner where they usually separated, neither of them moved to separate. "Walk with me?" she said. "Where?" "I don't know. Somewhere." They walked for a long time. The city at 10 on a Tuesday in February was quiet enough to think, the streets mostly empty, the cold doing its work on anyone without a reason to be outside. They walked without particular direction, conversation dropping in and out, comfortable in the silences and alive in the talking, and at some point his hand found hers without a decision being made about it, just the simple fact of their hands in the cold and the natural thing happening. She didn't pull away. She didn't comment. She folded her fingers through his like it was something they'd done before, and they kept walking. "I've been thinking about something you said," she said after a while. "Which part?" "The part about your father, about spending 2 years feeling like a compass that couldn't find north." She paused. "I felt like that for a long time. Not about grief exactly, just direction. I know what I'm building. I know where the company is going. I have a 5-year roadmap and a 10-year vision, and I can walk you through every strategic decision that's led to where I am." A beat. "But if you asked me what I actually wanted, for myself, not the company, I'm not sure I could tell you." "What do you think you want?" Nathan asked. She was quiet for half a block. "This," she said, not dramatically, just a word plain as a stone set on a table. "I think I want something that feels like this." "Okay," he said. "That's it? Okay?" "I mean, yes. Okay, I want that too." He looked at her. Was there supposed to be more? She laughed. The real one, the surprised one. "I just told you something I've never told anyone, and your response is okay." "It's a good okay," he said. "It's an okay that means, yes, me too, I'm glad. Let's keep going, not a dismissive okay." "I don't know how you communicate so much with so few words," she said. "Practice," he said. "I've been explaining things to a 4-year-old for 4 years. You learn to be efficient." She leaned into him slightly as they walked, a small adjustment of proximity, and he tightened his hand in hers, and they kept moving through the February dark without resolving anything official or declaring anything formal, because neither of them was quite ready for the words yet, and that was all right. But it was decided, in the way things are decided before the deciding catches up with itself. The following Saturday, Victoria came to the apartment for the first time with no particular agenda. Not dinner, not an activity, just came over at 11 in the morning with a bag from the bakery 2 blocks from her office that she'd apparently visited specifically. She'd brought a coffee for Nathan, a hot chocolate for Lily, and a cortado for herself, and she'd handed these out with the slightly stiff efficiency of someone executing a plan they'd thought about more carefully than they were letting on. Lily had accepted the hot chocolate with the gravity of someone receiving a formal offering. "Thank you," Lily said. "You're welcome," Victoria said. Lily regarded her for a moment. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" Nathan made a sound. Victoria looked at him sideways. Then she looked back at Lily with admirable composure. "What made you think that?" "You hold his hand," Lily said. "I saw." "You saw that?" Nathan said. "I see everything," Lily said with the authority of a 4-year-old who is entirely correct. Victoria looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at Victoria. Something passed between them. A micro-conversation, a negotiation conducted entirely in a glance, the kind of exchange that requires a certain amount of knowing someone to pull off. "I think," Victoria said carefully, turning back to Lily, "that your dad and I are very good friends who are figuring some things out." Lily considered this with great seriousness. "Okay," she said, "but you can sit next to me on the couch if you want." "I'd like that," Victoria said. Lily took her hot chocolate and climbed onto the couch with the authority of a person who has made a decision And Victoria sat beside her, and Nathan stood in the doorway of his own living room with his coffee getting cold in his hand, watching the two of them together. His daughter and the woman who was something more than a friend and something not yet fully named, and felt the particular feeling that doesn't have a clean word in English. Not happy exactly. Bigger than happy. More complicated and more solid and more frightening than happy. Like something was happening that he couldn't undo, and he was no longer sure he'd want to. Spring came slowly that year, the way it does in New York when winter decides it isn't finished. A warm day in March that convinced everyone, followed by 2 weeks of cold that felt personal. Nathan noticed it in the particular way he'd been noticing everything lately, with the awareness of someone whose life had acquired a new dimension that changed how the light fell on ordinary things. They were together now, formally, in the way that had no formal announcement because neither of them were people who made announcements. It had simply become true over the course of February, the way water becomes ice, a process rather than a moment, the crossing of a threshold so gradual that you only knew you'd crossed it by looking back. He had stopped managing the distance between them. She had stopped treating her own feelings like a variable to be optimized. What remained when both of them stopped doing those things was something simpler and more difficult than either of them had expected. The practical reality of it was something neither of them had fully mapped before they stepped into it. Their lives existed in separate gravitational fields. This had been manageable when they were meeting for coffee, for dinner, for Sunday walks, when there was natural separation built into the structure of what they were doing. It was different now. Now the separation required active effort, and the effort had edges that caught on things. Victoria's schedule was not a schedule so much as a controlled emergency. She was in the office by 7 most mornings. Board meetings, acquisition negotiations, investor calls that ran across time zones. Her calendar was a document of obligation, every hour spoken for, the margins of her days already claimed by the next thing before the current thing was finished. She was good at it. She'd built her entire adult life around being good at it. Nathan's life ran on a different clock entirely. Lily's preschool opened at 8 and closed at 3, and every single day between those hours had to account for the fact that someone needed to be there at 3. His work was flexible, but Lily was not. Sick days, school events, the Tuesday in March when the preschool called at 1:15 to say Lily had a fever and could someone come. These were the fixed points of his existence, the ones that didn't move regardless of what else needed to happen. The first real friction came on a Wednesday evening in late March. They'd had dinner plans, a place in Soho Victoria had been wanting to try, something she'd mentioned twice in casual conversation, and Nathan had registered as the kind of low-key enthusiasm she expressed about things she was actually looking forward to. He'd arranged for Marcus to have Lily. He'd left work early to shower and change, which felt like an extravagance on a Wednesday, but the kind he was willing to make. At 5:40, she texted, "Singapore just moved their call to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Earliest I can be out is 9:30. I'm sorry." Nathan looked at the message for a moment. He was standing in his bedroom, dressed, with 2 hours and 45 minutes of empty Wednesday evening suddenly opened up around him. He texted back, "It's okay. We can reschedule." She called him at 9:57, still in her office, voice carrying the particular thinness of someone who has been on calls for 4 hours straight. "I'm sorry," she said. "The Singapore situation is more complicated than we thought, and Hendricks kept talking in circles, and I couldn't—" "Victoria," he said, "it's okay." "It's not. I was looking forward to tonight." "I know, me too." He was on the couch by then, the evening resolved into a quiet night at home. Lily picked up from Marcus and now asleep. "We'll go another time." A pause. "You're not upset?" "I'm a little disappointed," he said, "but I'm not upset. You didn't cancel to do something fun. Singapore called." "Most people would be upset." "I'm not most people," he said. "Also, I spent the evening watching a documentary about deep-sea fish, which was objectively more interesting than I expected, so the night wasn't wasted." She laughed, but it was tired around the edges. "I don't want to be someone who cancels on you," she said. "You're not. You canceled once. It'll happen again. My life is—" A pause. "I've never had to account for someone else's schedule before. I've always just—" operated according to what the work needed, and assumed everyone around me would adjust. I'll adjust, Nathan said. That's not a problem. I don't want you to always be the one adjusting. Then we'll figure it out, he said. That's what people do. We'll figure it out as we go, and neither of us will get it right every time, and he exhaled, that's just what this is. Silence on the line for a moment. He heard her shift position, the sound of her leaning back. You make it sound uncomplicated, she said. It is uncomplicated, he said. It's also hard. Those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Another pause. I don't know where you come from, she said quietly. Brooklyn, he said. I've mentioned this. Good night, Nathan. Good night, Victoria. The next complication was external, which in some ways was harder to navigate because it came with an audience. In April, a profile piece ran in a financial magazine, the kind of long-form business journalism that Victoria did 2 or 3 times a year as part of the deliberate management of her public profile. The piece was respectful, well-researched, focused on Ashford Capital's expansion into healthcare technology. Nathan read it online on a Friday morning while Lily ate cereal across from him and Gerald sat propped against the orange juice. He was most of the way through it when he hit the paragraph. Ashford, who turned 30 in December, has long kept her personal life rigorously private. Sources close to the executive suggest she is currently in a relationship, though Ashford declined to comment on the subject. What's notable, insiders say, is the identity of the man in question. Not a name familiar to the financial world, but a Brooklyn-based accountant described by those who've caught glimpses of the pair as completely incongruous with Ashford's usual orbit. Nathan put his phone down. Lily looked up. Are you okay, Daddy? Fine, he said. Eat your cereal. He was not fine exactly, not because the piece had said anything cruel. Completely incongruous was neutral enough as these things went. It was something more specific than that. The sensation of being observed from the outside, of having something that had existed quietly in the private space between two people suddenly entered into a public record, even a minor one. He'd known, in the abstract, that dating Victoria Ashford meant accepting that her life had a public dimension that his didn't. He'd known it and thought he'd accounted for it. The gap between knowing something in the abstract and feeling it land in a specific paragraph on a specific Friday morning was wider than he'd estimated. He didn't bring it up. He was still deciding how he felt about it. She brought it up first, calling him that afternoon before he'd worked out what he wanted to say. You saw the piece, she said. Not a question. Yeah. I want to apologize for the incongruous comment. You didn't write it. My PR team has a relationship with that editor. I should have anticipated it. And, Victoria, he said. Stop. She stopped. Are you embarrassed? He asked. The question came out more direct than he'd planned, but he needed to know, and he'd learned that the only way to get a real answer from her was to ask a real question. A pause. No, she said. Then, I'm angry that they made it sound like something to be explained. That's different from embarrassed. Yes, she said. It is. Her voice was precise and controlled in the way it got when she was feeling something she'd elected to manage rather than express. You are not a curiosity. You are not a deviation from some expected pattern. And I'm angry that... She stopped. I'm sorry. For the reach of my life into yours in ways you didn't sign up for. I signed up, Nathan said. You signed up for me, not for... They're attached, he said. I understand that. I understood it going in. He paused. I just want to know that when the next thing comes, because there will be a next thing, you're not going to start treating me like a problem that needs to be managed. The silence that followed was brief and significant. I hear you, she said. Not I would never, or of course not. Those would have been reflexive and he would have known it. Just, I hear you. Okay, he said. Then we're fine. What followed was not a crisis, but an adjustment, the way two people recalibrate when the terrain turns out to be more variable than the map suggested. Victoria made a habit of being more specific about schedule conflicts in advance rather than apologizing after. Nathan made a habit of saying when something bothered him rather than filing it and hoping it dissolved. Neither of them did these things perfectly, Both of them kept trying. What helped, more than either of them planned for, was Lily. Victoria had come into the relationship with no particular experience of children. She was the only child of parents who had been too busy and too wealthy to have more than one, raised in environments where children were a demographic you saw in other people's lives. She did not know how to talk to a 4-year-old, specifically. She'd had to figure it out in real time through the particular trial and error of someone who approaches unfamiliar problems with rigorous attention. Lily, for her part, had performed no evaluative process at all. She had simply decided, somewhere around the second Saturday, that Victoria was acceptable, and had proceeded from that baseline with complete confidence. The thing Nathan watched develop between them was not something either of them engineered. It was organic in the way that is slightly embarrassing to describe without sounding sentimental, so he mostly watched it without saying much. Victoria had discovered, sometime in March, that Lily was interested in how things worked. Not in a generic, curious child way, but specifically, she wanted to know the mechanism. How does the elevator know which floor to stop at? Why does bread get hard when you leave it out? How do they make the yellow lines in the road stay there? These were questions Nathan answered to the best of his ability and often had to Google supplementarily, which Lily accepted as a reasonable outcome. Victoria, presented with these questions, answered them with the same directness she brought to everything. Not simplified, not condescending, just answered, as specifically and accurately as she could. The elevator conversation had lasted 25 minutes. Lily had listened with total concentration and asked 4 follow-up questions. Victoria had answered all 4. At the end, Lily had said, "That's a lot of engineering," and gone back to her drawing, and Victoria had looked at Nathan with an expression that was something between stunned and quietly delighted. "She just accepts the information," Victoria said. "She's a very literal child," Nathan said. "I like her," Victoria said, as if slightly surprised to be saying it, and then not surprised at all. By April, Victoria was at the apartment on weekend afternoons with a regularity that had become unremarkable. She did not move in. Nothing like that, nothing formal, but she had a coffee cup that lived in Nathan's cabinet, and she knew where Lily's art supplies were kept, and she had strong opinions about the organization of the lower kitchen shelf that she had expressed once and then let go of when Nathan explained that the current system, while visually chaotic, had an internal logic that made sense to him. "The pasta is next to the coffee," she'd said. "The pasta and the coffee are both things I need in the morning," he'd said. She'd looked at him. "That is genuinely one of the stranger explanations I've ever accepted. And yet, yeah," she'd agreed. What she hadn't anticipated, what Nathan watched her discover slowly and without fanfare, was what it felt like to be embedded in the small routines of someone else's life. Not the scheduled events, not the dinners they planned, but the texture of ordinary days. Lily's Saturday morning pancake ritual, which required specific participation. Lily stood on her step stool and stirred the batter and was very clear about the division of labor. The reading before bed, which Nathan did with Lily every night, that Victoria had started joining for, sitting at the end of the bed with her legs crossed while Nathan did the voices, and Lily corrected his dragon. "You still sound like a man," Lily said one evening in April. "I've been working on it," Nathan said, and tried again. "Better," Lily said charitably, "but not great." Victoria, from the end of the bed, said nothing, but Nathan saw her press her lips together against a smile. Afterward, when Lily was asleep and they were in the kitchen, Victoria making tea and Nathan cleaning up the dinner dishes they'd abandoned earlier, she said, "How do you do it every night?" "Do what?" "The routine. The same things, the same order, the same—" She paused. "I'd go insane." "It's not the same," Nathan said. "It looks the same from the outside, but it's different every time. Different book, different thing she says, different way she falls asleep. The structure is the same, but the content changes." He rinsed a glass. "The structure is actually what makes it work. She knows what's coming, so she can relax into it." Victoria looked at her tea. "I didn't have any of that," she said. "Growing up, the evenings were whatever they were. My parents weren't home most nights." "Who was?" "A rotating cast of au pairs. They were kind, mostly. They weren't—" She paused. "They weren't invested." Nathan dried his hands on the dish towel. He didn't say anything because he'd learned that she didn't need him to say anything at these moments. She needed the space to keep talking or not, and filling the space was how you accidentally closed it. "I used to think it was fine," she said. "That I was fine. Self-sufficient, early. That's a good thing to be." She looked up. "I didn't figure out until much later that I'd learned self-sufficiency as a survival skill and just never been given the option to unlearn it." "You can unlearn things," Nathan said. "I'm working on it." She said it without drama. "Slowly." "Lily's teaching you pancake technique," he said. "That's a start." The smile that crossed her face was small and real and tired in the edges, in the way that meant she'd let herself feel something without armoring it first. "That's a start," she agreed. What came next was harder, and Nathan had been half expecting it without knowing exactly what shape it would take. In May, his mother called on a Tuesday night. Eleanor Cross was 63, sharp, opinionated, and had been Nathan's primary support system for the entirety of Lily's life, picking her up when Nathan couldn't, keeping her on the weekends when a work situation required it, the bedrock of the practical structure that made Nathan's life function. She was not a woman who expressed things obliquely. She'd raised Nathan alone from the time he was 10, after his father left, and she'd developed a directness about things that she considered a virtue, and others occasionally considered abrasive. She'd met Victoria twice, once briefly, once at a Sunday dinner at Nathan's apartment in April, that had gone fine in the way that fine can cover a lot of ground. "I want to talk to you about Victoria," Eleanor said. Nathan was putting Lily to bed and held up one finger to indicate he needed a minute. Lily, who could interpret his signals with the fluency of long practice, settled back against her pillow with Gerald. He moved to the hallway. "Okay," he said. "Talk." "I like her," Eleanor said. "I want to start with that." "But." "Not a but. A concern." A pause. "She's not very comfortable, Nathan." "What do you mean?" "I mean, she doesn't know how to be in a family. She's watching all the time, like she's learning procedures." Nathan leaned against the wall. "She grew up differently than we did," he said. "I know. I'm not criticizing her for it. I'm asking if you've thought about what it means for Lily." "What do you think it means for Lily?" "I think Lily is already attached," Eleanor said. "That child is attached to her. I watched it at Sunday dinner. Lily kept checking to see where Victoria was in the room, kept making sure she was still there. That's attachment, Nathan. That's not casual." "I know," Nathan said quietly. "So I'm asking, not interfering, asking, are you sure? About how serious this is? Because if this doesn't work out, it's not just you who—" "Mom." I know. You're an adult. She's not going anywhere," Nathan said. He said it more certainly than he'd planned to, and then sat with the certainty for a moment, checking it, and found it solid. This is real. It's not casual." Silence on Eleanor's end. "She looks at you like she's still surprised," Eleanor said finally, "like she keeps not expecting you to be what you are." "Yeah," Nathan said. "I know." "That's not a bad thing," Eleanor said. "I just want to make sure someone's taking care of you in return." "She does," he said. "In her way." The conversation with his mother stayed with him, not because it had said anything he didn't know, but because naming things out loud had a different weight than knowing them quietly. He'd been careful, all these months, not to say too much. Not to Lily, not to Marcus, not even to himself in the clear internal voice that knew the difference between what he hoped and what he knew. Victoria had been equally careful in her own way. She'd let herself in slowly, incrementally, with the caution of someone who has been badly burned and knows it. But she was there. She was consistently, reliably there. And in his experience, that was the thing that mattered most. Not the declarations, not the grand gestures, but the ordinary consistency of someone who showed up. The conversation that finally moved something, that took what had been real and made it spoken, happened on a Saturday evening in late May, on the roof of his apartment building, which had a collection of mismatched chairs and a partial view of the Brooklyn skyline that was either charming or depressing depending on your mood. Lily was asleep downstairs. They'd come up for the air and the quiet after a dinner that had turned into a longer evening than either of them planned, the comfortable kind that extend themselves without effort. "I've been thinking about Lily's birthday," Victoria said. "It's in August," Nathan said. "I know, I was thinking, if you wanted, I could help plan it. Not take over, just—" She stopped. She mentioned last week that she wanted a party with a moon theme, because of the moon that follows the car. Nathan looked at her. "She told you that?" "On Thursday, when you were in the other room." Victoria looked at the skyline. "She's apparently been thinking about it for a while. She has specific ideas about the decorations." He was quiet for a moment. "You want to help plan Lily's birthday party? If that's— Yes. If that's not crossing a line." "What line would it be crossing?" She looked at him. "I don't know," she said. "That's actually the point. I don't know where the lines are yet. I don't know what might—" She paused, choosing carefully. "I don't know what role I'm supposed to occupy in her life. I'm aware I'm not her mother. I'm aware there are things I can't be for her. But I also don't know what I am, exactly. And I don't want to overstep while also not wanting to stand back from something she might actually need." Nathan turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands. "What do you want to be?" he asked. "Not what you're supposed to be. What do you actually want?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. The May air moved around them, cool and carrying the smell of the city, and somewhere below them someone was playing music faintly. "Something consistent," she said finally. "I want to be someone she knows is going to be there, I'm not trying to replace anything. But I think—" She stopped again. "I think she's been building her understanding of adults around you, mostly. Your mother, Marcus. And I want to be someone she can add to that, someone dependable." Nathan set down his cup and looked at her fully. "Victoria," he said. She looked at him. "That's exactly the right thing to want," he said. She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding that breath for a while. "I wasn't sure," she said. "I know." He reached over and covered her hand with his. "For the record, she already thinks of you as consistent. She's 4. She makes assessments quickly, and she doesn't change them easily." He paused. "You're in." "She accepted me faster than I deserved," Victoria said quietly. "Kids don't measure it that way," Nathan said. "They just know how someone makes them feel." "How does she—" Victoria stopped. "Safe," Nathan said simply. "You make her feel safe. I've been watching." A pause. "You make me feel that way too, for whatever that's worth." She looked at him with something unguarded and slightly defenseless on her face, the expression she got when she'd stopped managing her response and was just having it. "It's worth a lot," she said. They sat on the roof for another hour after that, not talking about anything particularly significant. The birthday party logistics, a situation at her company that was resolving itself more cleanly than expected, the deep-sea fish documentary Nathan had made her watch on Wednesday that she had pretended to find tedious and had clearly found interesting. The May night settled around them and the city did its distant thing, and the discomfort that had been living in the spaces between them, the what are we, the where is this going, had not been resolved so much as absorbed, accepted, made room for. When she left at 11:30, taking the elevator down while Nathan checked on Lily one last time before bed, he stood in his daughter's doorway in the dark and did the thing he did, the quiet accounting of what was. Lily, asleep, one arm over Gerald, mismatched socks kicked off at the foot of the bed. The moon nightlight Nathan had bought in February still glowing softly on the wall. The city making its muffled sounds through the window glass. And something new in the apartment now, something that hadn't been there before Victoria. A sense of another person's presence that didn't disappear when she left, because she'd been here enough times that her absence had a shape. He could feel where she sat on the couch, which mug she used, the small particular order she brought to the counter beside the coffee maker that he'd started maintaining without deciding to. He pulled Lily's door closed gently and went to the kitchen and rinsed the mugs and turned off the lights, and thought about what his mother had said. "She looks at you like she's still surprised," and thought that was probably right. That she probably was still surprised. And he was too, actually, surprised in the specific way of something you'd stopped believing in finding its way to you anyway. He turned off the last light and went to bed, and for the first time in longer than he could accurately calculate, the quiet didn't feel like something he was waiting out. It felt like enough. The summer that followed was not perfect, which was precisely why it worked. Lily's birthday party happened on a Saturday in August, in the backyard of Eleanor's house in Flatbush, and it was moon-themed in the specific, slightly chaotic way that a party organized partly by a 5-year-old inevitably becomes. Victoria had spent 3 weeks on the logistics, not obsessively, but with the particular focused attention she brought to things she cared about, which Nathan recognized as her version of affection made practical. There were silver and white balloons. There was a cake shaped approximately like a crescent moon, which the bakery had executed with more ambition than precision, the points slightly uneven, the silver frosting pooling at the base. There was a star projector that threw pale dots across the ceiling of Eleanor's screened porch, and that Lily regarded with the expression of someone whose vision has been made real. Victoria had also, quietly, learned to make the pancakes. This had required 2 practice sessions on separate Saturday mornings, Lily supervising from her step stool with a degree of critical attention that Nathan found both entertaining and slightly painful to witness. Victoria had burned the first batch. Lily had said very kindly that they were okay, which in Lily's vocabulary meant they were not okay. The second batch had been better. By the party, she had the ratio down. "You memorized a pancake recipe," Nathan said, the morning of the party, watching her work. "I optimized it," Victoria said, not looking up from the pan. "That's the same thing." "It is not the same thing. Memorizing is passive. Optimizing involves—" "Victoria." She looked up. "Thank you," he said simply. She looked at him for a moment with that expression he'd come to know, the one that appeared when she'd been seen doing something that mattered to her and was deciding how to receive that. Then she turned back to the pan. "The second batch is almost done," she said. "Go get Lily before she comes in here and starts directing." Too late. Lily appeared in the doorway in her pajamas, Gerald under one arm, assessing the kitchen situation. "Are those the good ones or the practice ones?" she asked. "The good ones," Victoria said. Lily climbed onto her step stool and leaned over to inspect the pan with the gravity of a quality control inspector. "They look right," she pronounced. "The circles are better." "Thank you," Victoria said with complete seriousness. "You're getting better," Lily said, and climbed back down and went to sit at the table. And Victoria turned back to the stove, and Nathan watched the two of them and felt something settle in his chest that he didn't try to name because some things lose something in the naming. The party went the way children's parties go, loudly, briefly, with a sugar arc that peaked around 2 in the afternoon and sent 6 5-year-olds into a state of vibrating, incoherent happiness before the crash. Eleanor ran the outdoor portion with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. Marcus arrived 45 minutes late with a gift that was disproportionately large relative to any reasonable gift-giving standard, which was entirely in character. Lily opened it, found a stuffed moon, large, silver, faintly luminous, and held it next to Gerald for comparison. "Gerald, this is Luna," she announced. "You live together now." Marcus looked at Nathan. "Luna," he said with appropriate reverence. "She names everything," Nathan said. "It's a whole system." Victoria was quiet at the party, in the way she was quiet in groups that weren't her professional context. Not withdrawn, just observing, finding her edges. Eleanor watched her the way Eleanor watched things she was forming a final opinion about, which Nathan noticed and chose not to comment on. At some point in the afternoon, while Nathan was managing the candle situation on the imprecise crescent moon cake, he looked across the yard and saw Victoria and Eleanor sitting together in the porch chairs, talking. Not the polite, managed talking of two people being careful with each other. Actual talking. Eleanor leaning slightly forward in the way she did when she was interested in something. Victoria, with her hands wrapped around a glass of iced tea, answering something with more than 2 sentences. He did not go over. He let it be. Later, driving home with Lily asleep in the back seat and Victoria in the passenger seat, he asked, "What were you and my mother talking about?" Victoria looked out the window for a moment. "She was telling me about your father," she said. "The early years, when you were small." Nathan hadn't expected that. "Why?" "I think she wanted me to understand something about who you are," Victoria said. "Where the—" She paused. the steadiness comes from. She said you were 8 when he first got sick, and you were so careful after that. You started making sure everything was in order, checking things. She said it broke her heart a little, watching an 8-year-old decide he needed to be reliable. Nathan was quiet for a moment. Outside, Brooklyn moved past the windows. I didn't know she thought about it that way, he said. She's proud of you, Victoria said. In a way that... She stopped. She's proud of what you built out of hard material. That's what she said. She said you built something decent out of hard material, and she wanted me to know I was getting something worth having. The car was quiet for a moment. Lily shifted in the back seat, some dream moving through her, and resettled. She said that? Nathan said. Verbatim, Victoria said. I thought you should know. He didn't say anything else for the rest of the drive. Victoria didn't press him to. That was one of the things about her that he'd come to rely on without realizing it. Her knowledge of when a thing needed space around it, when words were the wrong tool. The thing about the year that followed, the long stretch from Lily's 5th birthday through the seasons turning and turning again, was that it was made of ordinary days. That sounds like a diminishment. It wasn't. Ordinary days were the thing Nathan had been building toward without knowing it, the thing that required the most sustained effort and produced the least visible result and mattered more than almost anything else. Ordinary days were what a life was actually made of, once you stripped away the events and the turning points and the moments that made good stories. What you were left with was Tuesday evenings and Saturday mornings and the small negotiations of two people making room for each other in the limited square footage of daily existence. Victoria was not an easy person to make room for. He'd known this going in, and the knowing had not fully prepared him. She worked at hours that were inconsiderate of any schedule but her own, not out of selfishness, but out of decades of a life that had never had to consult anyone else's clock. She had a way of going quiet during high-stress periods that looked like distance and had to be learned as something different, not withdrawal, but compression, the way she managed herself when there was too much pressure and not enough bandwidth. She forgot things that weren't on her calendar. She had opinions about the organization of shared spaces that were specific and occasionally baffling. She was not good at first at asking for help, which meant she went too long carrying things alone and then showed up visibly depleted in ways she hadn't announced were coming. Nathan learned her rhythms the way you learn a language by living in the country. Imperfectly at first, with misreadings that cost something, then gradually with more fluency, until he could feel the difference between her good silences and her difficult ones, could read the specific angle of tension she carried in her shoulders when something at work had gone sideways that she hadn't told him about yet. "You've got the Harrison thing," he said one evening, not looking up from the papers he was reviewing. She looked over from where she was sitting with her laptop. "How did you—" "Your left shoulder," he said. She looked at her own shoulder, then back at him. "That's unsettling." "It's called paying attention," he said. "Do you want to talk about it?" She closed the laptop. Harrison is trying to restructure the voting rights on the Meridian deal in a way that benefits his fund at the expense of our position, and he keeps presenting it as a mutual benefit, and it makes me want to... She stopped. "It makes me want to say things that would not be professionally advisable." "What do you actually want to say?" She told him. It was in fact professionally inadvisable, and also very specific and anatomically creative, and Nathan listened with complete gravity until the end of it, and then laughed for a solid 30 seconds while she watched him with an expression that was trying to stay irritated and failing. "Feel better?" he asked. "Marginally," she said. "Don't repeat any of that." "To who?" "Marcus would appreciate it, but he'd never let you forget it." She almost smiled. "Harrison is going to back down," she said, moving back into business mode. "He just needs to feel like he found the exit himself. I'll give him a face-saving adjustment on the timeline, and he'll convince himself he won something. And then? And then we close and I stop thinking about him." She picked up her laptop again. "Thank you. I didn't do anything. You let me say the thing I couldn't say to anyone else," she said. "That's something." It was. He'd come to understand that about her. That the people in her professional life who admired and feared her in equal measure had no idea what she was like when she wasn't performing competence, and that the performance was so constant that she'd lost track, somewhere along the way, of having anywhere to put the things she couldn't be competent about. He'd become that place. He didn't take it lightly. There were also the things she did that he hadn't asked for and hadn't expected. She had a habit of noticing what he didn't say about himself. He had carried, for most of his adult life, a certain limitation of ambition, not born from lack of ability, but from necessity. He'd shaped his professional life around what was stable and manageable, which meant his own accounting practice, a client roster he could handle without help, income that was reliable and modest. He'd made peace with this. He told himself peace was the same as satisfaction. In October of the second year, Victoria sat across from him at his kitchen table on a Sunday evening while he was reviewing his books and said, without particular preamble, "What would you do if you weren't worried about risk?" He looked up. "What do you mean?" "With your work. If stability wasn't the constraint, if you could build something without the ceiling you've put on it." He looked at her carefully. "Are you about to offer me something?" "I'm asking a question." "Victoria, I'm genuinely asking," she said, "not as a setup. I want to know what you'd build if you weren't being so careful about building only what you can afford to lose." He sat back in his chair. It was the kind of question he'd stopped asking himself because unanswered questions about what you wanted had a way of making the present feel insufficient, and he couldn't afford to find the present insufficient. "Bigger," he said. "I'd go bigger. I have ideas about small business financial strategy that go beyond what one accountant can implement in one practice. There are structures, approaches. I've been writing some of it down for years, not seriously, just—" He stopped. "Writing what down?" He was quiet for a moment, then got up and came back with a notebook from the shelf. A plain one, slightly worn at the corners, that had been sitting there unremarkably for 3 years. He set it on the table. She opened it. She read in the quiet, focused way she read everything, and he watched her face, and what he saw there was not the polite interest of a partner being supportive. It was the recognition of someone who knew what they were looking at. "This is good, Nathan," she said. "It's notes. It's a methodology." She turned a page. "This approach to multi-entity small business accounting, do you know how underserved that space is? The mid-market small business that's grown beyond what standard accounting software handles, but can't afford enterprise level." "Oh," she looked up. "You've been sitting on this." "I've been keeping the lights on," he said. "Those aren't mutually exclusive." With a 5-year-old, they feel mutually exclusive. She set the notebook down carefully. "The way you set down something you've decided is significant." "I'm not going to push you," she said. I'm not making this a thing you have to do or I'll be disappointed. I'm saying, I see what this is, and I think you've been smaller than you need to be, and I wanted you to know someone else sees it." He looked at the notebook. He thought about the 8-year-old his mother had described, checking things, making sure everything was in order, deciding to be reliable before he was old enough to have chosen it consciously. "I'll think about it," he said. "That's enough," she said. It took him until the following spring to do anything with it. And when he did, when he started sketching an actual business plan for a small advisory firm, not just accounting, but financial strategy for growing small businesses, something with a partner eventually, real infrastructure, it was not because Victoria had pushed him. It was because she had seen something he'd stopped being able to see himself, and having it seen had made it real again. This was the thing about her that he had not expected and could not have predicted from the outside. That a woman who had built everything she had through self-sufficiency and control would turn out to be someone who noticed, specifically and carefully, what other people needed. Not in a managing way, in the way of someone who had been invisible long enough to know what it meant to be seen. The hard thing, when it came in November of that second year, and it came from a direction Nathan had not adequately prepared for. Lily's mother called. Her name was Rachel, and she had been absent with a consistency that had eventually graduated from painful to simply factual, a variable Nathan had long since accounted for, a gap in Lily's life that he'd worked hard to fill from other directions. Rachel called on birthdays sometimes. She sent packages at Christmas, contents unpredictable. She was not a villain in the story of Lily's life, just an absence, and absences have their own particular damage that's different from, and sometimes worse than active harm. She wanted to see Lily. Not a custody situation, nothing legal, nothing that required lawyers, which Nathan confirmed immediately with the particular cold efficiency of someone protecting something important. Rachel was in New York for 3 weeks. She'd gotten herself to a better place, her words. She wanted to try to be present in some way. She wasn't asking for much. Nathan sat on this for 2 days before telling Victoria. 2 days of carrying it alone, running through the variables, trying to determine the right thing, which was not always the same as the clear thing. "You should have told me sooner," Victoria said, when he finally told her. Not angry, just direct. "I was processing it." "I know. You process by going quiet and then presenting me with a fully formed position." She looked at him. "What's the position?" "I think Lily should meet her," he said, "under controlled circumstances, one afternoon, with me present." He paused. "I think, whatever I feel about it, Lily deserves the chance to know who her mother is, even the limited version of who she is." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "What do you feel about it?" He looked at the ceiling. "Complicated things," he said. "Things I'm not going to make Lily's problem." "What about my problem?" she said quietly. "Can they be my problem?" He looked at her. "You've been carrying this alone for 2 days," she said. "I'm not a resource for good times only. Tell me the complicated things." So he did. The anger that he thought was gone and apparently wasn't, not entirely, the specific variety of anger that belongs to someone who did something alone that was supposed to be shared. The fear underneath the anger, that Rachel would walk back in with 3 weeks of good intentions, and Lily would open a door Nathan had spent 5 years carefully managing, a door that could hurt her if things went wrong again. The smaller, less noble feeling underneath that, the one that knew it was not purely about Lily, that had to do with something more personal, more protective, more tangled. Victoria listened to all of it. She did not offer solutions. She did not reframe it. She sat with him in it, which was the harder and more valuable thing. "What do you need from me?" she asked when he'd finished. "I need you to keep being here," he said. "After. Whatever happens with the Rachel thing, I need to know the ground under me is still the same ground." "It is," she said. "That's not going to change." "You can't know." "Nathan." Her voice was steady and quiet. "I'm here. That's not a provisional statement. I'm not going anywhere because this got complicated." She paused. "You stayed when things got complicated for me. That's not a debt. I'm not keeping score. I'm just saying I know what that looks like. I've seen what staying looks like. I'm staying." The afternoon with Rachel happened on a Saturday in early December. In a public park, Nathan present the whole time, watching his daughter meet a version of her mother that was trying, visibly, awkwardly, with the effort of someone doing something they'd left too long and didn't know how to start. Lily was polite and careful in the way she was careful with strangers, which was its own small heartbreak, the fact that her own mother registered as a stranger. Rachel cried once, briefly, and covered it quickly. Lily pretended not to notice, which meant she had noticed. Nathan held it together through the force of having decided beforehand that holding together was the job, and did not allow himself to feel anything fully until he was in the car driving home with Lily in the back seat, quiet in an unusual way. "Daddy," Lily said. "Yeah, Bug." "Why does she live far away?" He'd prepared for questions, but not necessarily this one. "She's figuring some things out," he said. "Sometimes grown-ups have to go somewhere else to figure things out." Lily was quiet. "Did you ever go somewhere else to figure things out?" "No," he said. "I stayed." "Why?" "Because you were here," he said simply. "That was where I needed to be." Lily seemed to think about this for a moment. Then, "Victoria stays too," she said. "Yeah," Nathan said, "she does." "I like that she stays," Lily said, and looked out the window, apparently satisfied, and Nathan drove the rest of the way home with something in his throat that he didn't try to talk around. When they got home, Victoria was there. She'd let herself in with the key Nathan had given her in September, and she was in the kitchen with the quiet efficiency of someone who had decided to make herself useful in a practical way. There was soup on the stove, the real kind, the kind that takes time, and the apartment smelled like something warm and specific and chosen. Lily walked in, assessed the situation, said soup with quiet satisfaction, and went to wash her hands without being asked, which was so unusual that Nathan stood in the doorway for a moment processing it. Victoria looked at him from across the kitchen, The question was in her face. How did it go? How are you? Where are you? But she didn't ask it out loud because Lily was there, and the evening wasn't about Nathan's feelings yet. He shook his head slightly. Later. She nodded. Okay. They ate soup, and Lily told them about a complicated social situation at kindergarten involving a disagreement about who got to be the moon in a game, which had apparently been resolved through diplomacy of Lily's own devising, and Victoria asked clarifying questions about the power dynamics of kindergarten lunar politics with the same focused interest she brought to board negotiations, and Lily answered her with the satisfaction of someone whose expertise is being taken seriously. Later, after Lily was asleep, Nathan sat on the couch and Victoria sat beside him, and he told her how it had actually gone. The Rachel of it, the complicated feelings of it, and she listened without fixing, which was what he needed. And at some point his head found her shoulder and he stopped talking and just sat with the specific exhaustion of a hard day done. She said you stay, Victoria said quietly after a while. Lily? In the car. She told me what you said, that you stayed because she was here. Nathan was quiet. I want you to know, Victoria said slowly, with the particular care she brought to things that mattered, that I understand what that cost. Not just the big version of it, not just the years, the small daily version. I've been watching it for 2 years now, and I don't think I'll ever stop being... She paused. I don't have a word for it that isn't too small. You don't have to have a word for it, he said. I know. I just want you to know I see it. A pause. You've been seen so little for so long, Nathan. For someone so deliberately present, you've been very invisible. And I don't want that anymore. He lifted his head from her shoulder. In the low light of the apartment, she looked like herself. Not the public version, not the controlled version, just the actual person who had arrived in his life carrying a briefing document and the ability to surprise herself by laughing. You make me visible, he said. For the record. She looked at him for a moment with that expression, the one he'd learned to recognize as Victoria in her most unguarded form, the one she'd been protecting for so long. It still showed a little fear when she let it out. I love you, she said, quietly, plainly, without decoration. The way she said things when she'd decided to say them, and was past being careful. It was the first time. He registered that, the first-time quality of it. I love you too, he said, just as plainly, because it was true and had been true for long enough that saying it felt less like a leap and more like acknowledging something that had already arrived. She nodded once, like something confirmed. Then she settled back, and he settled back, and outside the Brooklyn night did its familiar thing. And inside the apartment was the specific quiet of a place where someone else is breathing. The bookstore was on Atlantic Avenue, a place called Bound. Independent, slightly cramped, the kind of store where the organization system was internally consistent but not immediately decipherable from the outside. Nathan had found it 2 years earlier, walking Lily home from the park in a sudden rain, and they ducked inside and Lily had declared it the best place in Brooklyn, and they'd been coming back ever since. Victoria had started coming with them in the first spring. She had, predictably, strong opinions about books, and not always the opinions Nathan expected. She liked fiction that was structurally demanding. She had read things he'd never heard of, and not heard of things he considered obvious. They had argued about books in Bound on 3 separate occasions, once loudly enough that the owner, a quiet man named Stewart, who had the patience of someone who ran an independent bookstore in a difficult commercial environment, had looked over from the register with the expression of someone witnessing something familiar. It was a Saturday in January, 3 years after the matchmaking event at the Upper East Side townhouse, and the city was cold in the specific way of late winter, the kind of cold that had stopped being dramatic and was just the factual condition of the air. Lily was 7 now. She had the same quality of focused attention she'd always had, directed now at chapter books she carried in her backpack and consulted at intervals throughout the day. Gerald was still a fixture, though he shared the position now with Luna, the silver moon stuffed animal Marcus had given her, who occupied a specific shelf in Lily's room with what Lily described as dignity. They were in Bound on a Saturday afternoon, the 3 of them, the way they'd been on many Saturday afternoons. Lily was in the children's section with a degree of autonomy she'd recently negotiated and was exercising seriously. Victoria was in the fiction section disagreeing silently with someone's shelving decision. Nathan was somewhere between them. He'd had the ring for 6 weeks. It was in his coat pocket, where it had been for 6 weeks, through 4 separate occasions that he'd identified as possible and then abandoned for reasons that ranged from genuine to invented. He was not a man who struggled with decisions. He'd learned to make them and live with them, and he was at peace with that process. But this was not a decision he'd struggled with. It was the execution he kept second-guessing, the when and the how, the sense that it needed to be right, not in a cinematic way, but in a true way, true to what they actually were. He found Victoria in the fiction section, reading the first page of something, her coat still on, a small frown of concentration on her face. "What is it?" he asked. "I'm deciding if the first page earns the next 20 pages, she said. "Does it?" "Maybe." She turned to page 2. He stood beside her, looking at the shelves. Bound had a particular smell, paper and something woody, and the faint coffee scent from the machine Stuart kept behind the register that was technically for staff only and in practice available to anyone who asked politely. "I want to ask you something," he said. Still reading. "Victoria." She looked up, read something in his face, and closed the book. He was not going to do a speech. He thought about it and discarded it because the speech was not who he was, and she didn't need oratory. She needed honesty, and the honest version was short. He reached into his coat pocket. "I've been carrying this for 6 weeks, he said. "I kept waiting for the right moment, and then I realized that the right moment isn't a thing that happens to you. It's a thing you choose." "So," he held it out. A simple ring, not flashy, the kind of thing he'd spent an afternoon choosing because it needed to look like her, like the person she was when nobody was watching. "I want to build the rest of this with you, all the hard parts and the ordinary parts and the parts we can't see yet." He paused. "You've been the most honest thing in my life for 3 years. I don't want to find out what that looks like when it ends, so I'm asking you not to let it end." Victoria looked at the ring. She looked at him. She was not crying. She would not cry in a bookstore in front of Stuart, and Nathan knew this about her, which was why when her eyes went bright, he understood it for what it was. "You've been carrying this for 6 weeks, she said. "Through 4 separate occasions I identified and abandoned. What stopped you the other 4 times? The first time Marcus called at the wrong moment. The second time seemed too expected. The third time Lily was there, and I wasn't sure if that was right. The fourth time—" He stopped. "The fourth time?" "I got scared," he said, "which is a thing I'm allowed to be." She looked at him for a moment that had weight to it. "Yes," she said. "Yes, what?" "Yes, Nathan, that's the answer to the question you just asked." He exhaled, one breath, the specific exhale of someone who has been holding something for 6 weeks. He put the ring on her finger. It fit, which he'd verified by borrowing a ring from her jewelry box 3 weeks ago and taking it to the jeweler and returning it to the exact position he'd found it, a covert operation he was moderately proud of. Lily appeared from around the corner of the shelves at this precise moment, holding 2 books and wearing the expression of someone who has assessed a situation. "Are you guys doing something important?" she asked. Victoria looked at her. "Your dad just asked me to marry him," she said. Lily looked at Nathan, then at Victoria, then at the ring. She was 7, which meant she understood what this meant with the particular clarity of a child who has been paying very close attention to adult behavior for a number of years. "Did you say yes?" she asked Victoria. "I said yes." Lily nodded once, with the gravity of someone confirming an outcome they'd anticipated. "Okay," she said, "I'm getting both books." She turned and walked back toward the register with complete composure, and Nathan heard Stuart's voice from the front of the store, and Lily's voice explaining her selections, and Victoria beside him made the sound. The real laugh, the surprised one, the one that still happened to her rather than being chosen. And he thought that was probably the most perfect possible response to the moment. Not a grand culmination, but a continuation, Lily negotiating book acquisition, while the biggest decision of the last 3 years settled quietly into the fabric of an ordinary Saturday. This is the thing that nobody tells you about the kind of love that actually holds. It doesn't feel like an ending. It doesn't feel like a resolution. It feels like the ground becoming more solid under your feet. Not perfect, not even, not free of difficulty, but solid. Something you can build on without being afraid every moment that it will shift. Nathan had spent a long time being careful. Careful with Lily, careful with his finances, careful with his own heart, careful in the way that a person becomes careful when they've learned that things can go wrong, and wrong is expensive when you have a child depending on you and no safety net except the one you build yourself. Careful was not a flaw. Careful had kept his daughter safe and his life functional and his integrity intact. But careful, held too long, becomes a ceiling. He'd needed someone to stand in his kitchen with a notebook full of unused ideas and say, "I see what this is." He'd needed someone to say, "The ground is solid. You can move." Victoria had not saved him. He needed to be clear about that, at least to himself, because he was the kind of man who noticed the difference. She had not arrived and made the hard things easy. She'd arrived and done the harder thing, stayed while the hard things remained hard, and let him see her struggle with her own, and built something in the shared space of two people who were both imperfect in ways that happened to be compatible. She had learned what it meant to belong somewhere, not to own it, not to manage it, but to genuinely belong, to be the person who knew where the art supplies were kept, who remembered which nightmare required which response, who had a mug that was hers in someone else's cabinet. 4,200 square feet of designed solitude, and what had finally felt like home was a modest apartment in Brooklyn with mismatched kitchen organization and a 7-year-old's opinions on pancake technique. And Nathan had learned that the compass finding north didn't mean staying still. It meant knowing where you were. It meant looking at your life, the actual life, not the managed version, not the protected version, but the whole actual thing, and being willing to want more for it. Outside bound, the January cold was still factual and unglamorous, the city going about its Saturday business with complete indifference to anything that had happened inside. Lily emerged first, books under her arm. Gerald visible in the outer pocket of her backpack, Luna squeezed in beside him. She looked at the two adults following her out and seemed to determine that her job was to proceed normally, which she did, leading the way down Atlantic Avenue with the confidence of a 7-year-old who knows her neighborhood. Victoria walked beside Nathan, her hand in his, the new ring a small, unfamiliar weight that she kept feeling with her thumb, learning the shape of it. "Marcus is going to be insufferable," Nathan said. "He's going to say he knew from the beginning," Victoria said. "He's not wrong. He knew from the beginning. He physically restrained you at the event." "He was trying to redirect me," Nathan said. "There's a distinction." "There is not a distinction. There's a small distinction." She looked at him sideways. "There is not a distinction." "Okay," he said. "There is not a distinction." Ahead of them, Lily had stopped to look at something in a store window and was waiting for them to catch up with the patience of someone who has learned that adults move at a reasonable pace if you give them time. The city moved around all three of them: cabs, voices, the particular sound of a Brooklyn Saturday, lived in and indifferent and full of everyone else's ordinary days. Nathan thought about the matchmaking event, the wrong table, the woman reading a briefing document while everyone else competed for attention. He thought about all the versions of himself that had led to standing on Atlantic Avenue in January with Lily ahead of them and Victoria beside him, and a business that was beginning to be real, and a future that was not guaranteed. Nothing was guaranteed, that was the whole truth of it, but was being built, steadily, by two people who had both learned the hard way what it cost to stop building. He thought about what Lily had said in the car that December evening: "Victoria stays." The simplest possible summary, the thing that everything else reduced to if you let it. You stay. That was it. That was the whole answer. Not the grand gesture, not the dramatic declaration, not the perfect moment chosen from a catalog of perfect moments. Just the daily, undramatic, absolutely essential act of staying. Of being there tomorrow and the day after, and the ordinary Tuesday, that didn't mean anything except that you were still there, meaning it. He had learned to stay when he was 8 years old, standing in a kitchen making sure everything was in order, not knowing it would become the thing he was best at. Victoria had learned it here, in this city, in this life, alongside a man who had never asked her to be different and a child who had decided without consultation that she was acceptable. Lily reached them and fell into step between them without ceremony, sliding her hand into Victoria's on one side and into Nathan's on the other, completing the circuit with the matter-of-fact confidence of someone who has decided how things are and sees no reason to discuss it further. They walked. The city moved around them. The January light came at a low angle between the buildings, the kind of light that makes ordinary things look briefly like they matter. And they did matter. They mattered completely, and nobody needed to say so.